context to understanding mind control, what it is, what it can be used for, and the methods and the phenomenon which make it work, lies within a strong understanding of consciousness at the root level. From this root, other subjects spanning from psychology to philosophy, logic, neurology, music and many more will expand upon this primary knowledge of how the mind functions. First of all, the general definition of consciousness. Awareness. Of awareness. To clarify, that means you are aware that you have an individual mind, with an independent awareness or perspective of the world, as opposed to a robot or a computer, which can arguably think, but hasn't an understanding or concept of itself as an existential entity within an environment outside of its simulated existence, calculated inside of a computer system. Expanding slightly further on this idea, the most simple phenomenon which gives humanity the ability to be aware of itself, that it is aware, is sleep, which is a lack of awareness to the external world, and in deep sleep, awareness of physical existence is lost. This then implies it is our faculties of sense which then would be used to differentiate between what is real and what is imagination.
And that is the psyche of man. We are the great danger. The psyche is the great danger. What if something goes wrong with the psyche?
Yes.
See? And so you see, it is demonstrated to us in our days what the power of the psyche is of man. How important it is to know something about it, but we know nothing about it. Nobody would give credit to the idea that the psychical processes of the ordinary man have any importance whatever. One thinks, oh, he has just what he has in his head, it is all from his surrounding, he's taught such a thing, believes such a thing. And particularly if he's well housed and well fed, then he has no ideas at all. That's the great mistake. Because he is just that as which he is born, and he's not born as tabula rasa, but as a reality.
It's imminent. That is certain.
Why?
Because we need more. We need more psychology. We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself. He is the great danger, and we are pitifully unaware of it. We know nothing of man, far too little. His psyche should be studied, because we are the origin of all coming evil.
Want to know who am I, how do I function, how do I tick?
These questions were at the heart of the pioneering work of Dr. Carl Gustav Jung, a Swiss psychologist who began working at the turn of the 20th century. Despite the conformity in dress, behavior, and attitude dictated by his time, Jung championed individuality, and he invited his patients to embrace the unique person each was meant to be.
Jung said, okay, that's what society tells you, that's what's expected of you, but what do you think? How do you feel?
He said that we all need to get to know ourselves better and know our motives better. And if we could really look at that more, that we would be able to be more accepting of differences.
In his own life, Carl Jung embarked on a painful journey of self-discovery, and the lessons he learned provided inspiration for generations to come.
The distinction between reality and imagination taken in full context becomes quite vague. Given that both depend upon internal processes, it's hard to argue such thing as an objective reality can exist, but rather that all things are subjective to each individual, except perhaps ideas and events shared and agreed to upon as being absolute fact by different people, all which finally concludes to imply reality is collective consciousness, being experienced in the present moment, not bound by time or space, but instead purely by consciousness.
About this end, because, you know, there are these peculiar faculties of the psyche, that it isn't entirely confined to space and time. You can have dreams or visions of the future. You can see round corners and such things. Only ignorance deny these facts. It's quite evident that they do exist and have existed always. Now these facts show that the psyche, in part at least, is not dependent upon these confinements. And then what? When the psyche is not under that obligation to live in time and space alone, and obviously it doesn't, then to that extent the psyche is not submitted to those laws. And that means a practical continuation of life, of a sort of psychical existence beyond time and space.
Words to change people's consciousness. And I believe that this is why an artist or writer is the closest thing in the contemporary world that you are likely to see to a shaman.
When you hear these talismanic words like control, security, stronger America, strength, realize that they're talismanic words that are being used against you. They're seduction words to try and get you to accept this because you don't have that. Well, you've been raped of that. The people who are selling you one story here have actually taken away the very things that you needed that were in your psyche to begin with.
In order to deter and defend against aggression, to preserve freedom and peace.
No one, friend or foe, should doubt our desire for peace.
The United States wants peace.
We seek peace. We strive for peace.
I pledged in my campaign for the presidency to end the war in a way that we could win the peace.
I respect your idealism. I share a certain peace. I want peace, much as you do.
Cyber attacks, nuclear program, biological weapons, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, chemical and biological weapons. Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. President Bush has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Tony Blair has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Donald Rumsfeld has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Richard Butler has said they do. The United Nations has said they do. The experts have said they do.
Stands the new man. His conception of reality is a dance of electronic images fired into his forebrain, a gossamer construction of his masters designed so that he will not under any circumstances perceive the actual or the real. His happiness is delivered to him through a tube or an electronic connection. His God lurks behind an electronic curtain, and when the curtain is pulled away, we find the CIA sorcerer and the media manipulator. Jim Keith, Mind Control, Mass Control, just one of the fine books on, the manipulation of consciousness that he did before he sadly basically was killed. He was one of the people, I think, one of few who understood that the real war is a war on consciousness.
These concepts of consciousness, combined with the phenomenon of brain waves, suggest that multiple layers, or dimensions, of reality in different states of heightened and lowered consciousness must correspond with each type of brain wave we experience. This is easily proven by altered states of mind. Substances such as LSD, DMT, ketamine and countless others can be named, which can completely modulate or distort, heighten and depress all sorts of aspects in the perceived reality, while also being unique and different for each person consuming the substance, and can be measured by disturbances in brainwave activity. This has been only a very brief overview of a much larger body of information. Chapter 1 continues in the next video, which gets into the basics of brainwaves, the different types, the relevance they play, and how they fit into the big picture, and how we perceive reality.